can we start off with what's your relationship to Detroit? Like how long have you lived here? How long has your family been here? Do you know how they got to Detroit?
Yeah, so I mean, I was born in Detroit, um, 1984. I was born in, I joke with people, I was born at the Home Depot. But that used to be Grace Hospital over there on 7 Mile and Myers. And so, and then obviously they moved Sinai Grace over there, um, off of Schaefer. But that's where I got my start. We started off actually as a family in Highland Park. And the first few years of my childhood was spent in Highland Park. Then we moved back towards the west side, and stayed back closer to where I was born over on Ohio and Curtis. That's off of 7 Mile. And, spent the first few years of my childhood there. Then we moved out to Southfield. And then I went to school for middle school out there. And then I went to high school at Brother Rice High School. And so then I went off to Eastern, and that's where I met Baba Charles. Started off at Eastern as a student athlete. So I lived obviously in Ypsilanti for a few short years. Got into some trouble when I came back home. When I came back home and we were living in Southfield, my father was sick, and so we ended up losing our home. And
Mm-hmm.
then so we ended up moving back to Detroit, and we stayed off of Grand River, off of Rutherford and Acacia. And so we lived there as a family for a few years. And, obviously we're just trying to get a footing and stability, as a family after, we lost the house. And so I was out of school at that time. I had met up with Baba Charles at Eastern by then. So while I was out of school, I was obviously frequenting the Hush House, and that began my relationship with that community in that neighborhood. So I, started working with Baba Charles. I also was traveling back and forth from Detroit to Ypsilanti with him to help him, get back and forth to the school, prepare basically as his administrative assistant, but also, as a liaison to the Hush House as well, and was working and starting to build relationships in that community. And so this is, obviously circa, the early 2000s, mid 2000s. And that began my journey. The first person I can kind of remember interacting with in the community was Van. Now, Van just really passed, but he's the son of Mr. Sammy and Miss Johnny. And God rest his soul as well. Mr. Sammy just recently passed as well. So that's been kind of crazy on that family. But that family was like kind of the first family that kind of brought me in because they'd known Baba Charles obviously for the longest. And, so obviously Vance was close to me in age. So me and him really kind of got along, and we would just kick it outside of Hut. And then also Sean, who lives across the street, he's been there with his father the whole time. And he's closer to like my older brother's age. I got two older brothers that are 11 and 9 years old. Obviously, one of my brothers passed away last year, but he's in their age group. So I kind of was able to identify with him because I got his brothers his age. So we kind of established a clique. Mikey and Devontae were younger than me, but they also lived on the block, and so they were still school age when I was, pretty much college age. And so I started to kind of mentor them, and then that mentorship turned into us trying to get Mikey into Harvard. And so
Oh
I
yeah,
worked
I
with
saw the
another,
short film about that.
yeah. So, um, we're working with Victor Hill. Victor is from Liberia. He started the Liberian Literacy Foundation. So we got to work pretty closely together. Marcus Cummings. I'm not sure if you ever got a chance to meet Afrika before she passed recently, but that was her husband. They were really close to Mama Sandra. She kind of raised him. He's a Detroit police officer. And so we worked in tandem, three different brothers from three different walks of life, that really, just kind of came together to make sure this young brother had everything he needed to get to the highest level that he could reach. I also was interacting with Youssef Shakur, because he was there. He had just came back home um, not too long before I started interacting with Hush House.
Mm-hmm.
And so he began to mentor me as well, and really just kind of teach me about the neighborhood, the history of the neighborhood. At the time, he was running a bookstore called Urban Network.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so he was releasing his first book, putting a little documentary together. He also had like an album as well. So he's always been big into the music and arts and culture. And so working with him really showed me a different aspect of activism and also the entrepreneurship side. Because Bunchy's always been, a hustler, somebody who knows how to do enterprise, do it in a way that's upright and righteous, and along the spirits of collective and cooperative economies.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that is a little bit of the history of what got me involved, and some of the people that got me involved in the neighborhood per se. Um, we did so much. Oh my God. There was a summer youth employment program where we organized kids in the neighborhood and work with the city to get them summer jobs. And I'll never forget with that. They tried to shut the program down early, and we went with Reverend Williams over at King Solomon Baptist Church, and we marched downtown. And at the time, Dave Bean was the mayor. And so we marched downtown and asked to speak to the mayor, but we ended up speaking to the city council and basically asked them not to cut the funding for our program short. They did anyway, but it was a lesson for the kids in like solidarity, organizing, building power, and that they have a voice and that they can stand up for themselves. And so it's obviously so many different stories. I'm just trying to put them all together in my head. And so I started living at Hush probably around 2000. My first day, because I lived at Hush on I think of 2-3 different occasions as a resident. My father ended up passing away. I got back into school around the same time. So I went back out to Ipsy for a little bit to finish school. I didn't live in Ipsy. I lived in Belleville, actually.
Mm-hmm.
But was still traveling back and forth to the Hush House. Now, this is around the time also Mama Sandra and Baba Charles had got married within this couple of years span. And so we were doing a lot of transition,
What
a lot of.
years was this when you were traveling back to Hush and when Baba Charles and Mama Sandra had got married? Around what time was this?
So they got married in 2007.
Okay.
And so this would have been around the same time I'm, traveling back and forth with Baba Charles. I met Baba Charles in 2004. I was out of school from 05 to 09.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I got back into school, this would have been 09. And then my father passed in 2010. And then I graduated in 2011, came back to Detroit. And I was staying with my aunt at the time, but was really more so kind of living out of my car when I graduated, because our family situation was still in flux. My father just passed away. My mom wasn't working and wasn't really stabilized. So it was just kind of like I said, I was kind of like living out of my car. I was keeping my stuff in my auntie house. She stays on the west side off of Artesian and Grand River. And so that, obviously brought me back to the city. And then I came back to stay at Hush in 2012, 2011 actually. And so I stayed there, and Victor stayed with me as well at the Hush House around this time. And he was working, I was working, just regular jobs or whatever. And then we were, obviously doing stuff at the Hush House. Victor got, sick, and he ended up having to leave and then left the Hush House and went back to Minnesota with his family so they could help take care of him. And then I kind of left the Hush House. It was a little bit of a situation, but I ended up moving down in Cass Corridor. I set off Alexandrine, in the Wayne, like down near the Wayne State area. Once I moved from Hush and lived there for a couple of years, and then I moved in with a lady friend of mine on the west side, off of Joy Road in Greenfield, and we stayed over there. I kind of took a little bit of a hiatus from Hush for a couple of years, and then got back involved around 2015, 2016. We got involved with the Poor People's Campaign, and so this was a national group, a national outfit, and let me see. Obviously, I moved into my place over at Virginia Park, behind Henry Ford Hospital around that same time as well. So I was staying. So for the most part, stayed on the west side of Detroit, and then after I moved from that place, I'm moved to where I'm living at now, which is over here by the river. And so obviously, my time as an organizer kind of overlapped. So I did a lot of community organizing. It started off with the unions, from 2013 to about 2016. Then I did some behavioral work at the Samaritan Hospital. Messed up my Achilles. That was crazy as hell. Blew out my Achilles. Um, and then, like I said, I started living over there off of Virginia Park. Stayed over there for about I think 6 or 7 years. Did mostly organizing work with Detroit Action. And then obviously I transitioned over to East Side Community Network, started, doing work over there, became a director. Then you fast forward today, I'm not there now, but still with the Hut House, still in the city, and my relationship with the neighborhood is still the same. I still have a great relationship with Sean. I got a great relationship with Jay, who stays next door. He was living next door around the same time I was staying there with Victor, in the early 2010s. And so we around close to the same age. He went to U of D High School, which was kind of a rival high school to mine. So we had a good rapport around that stuff. And just, we'll kick it up, about a lot of different things. Proud it so much.